Welcome to the National Minority Supply Development Council's Equity in Business podcast. My name is John Daniel, and I'm humbled to be your host, but I'm super thrilled to be here with Selina Cuffe, who is the Chief Growth Officer of what is called BCI, otherwise known as Blackstone Consulting. I just want to share something with you. This lady just jumped off a plane to make sure she would be here. Okay, now the good thing is it doesn't matter. She's a queen.
That's
She's
right.
gorgeous and she's
My
super intelligent. And she's a great wife and a great mother. But she is a professional that is second to none. Um, Welcome to this organization and what we're doing. Um,
Thank you, John.
Please, I think the most important thing that any of these podcasts represent is to hear who this person is. Tell us about your backstory.
Sure. And once again, thank you, John, for allowing me to share more about my journey and the things that are important to bring about equity for diverse suppliers and just diverse communities overall. I am a native Los Angelina who grew up with a phenomenal village, although um, my early days were not easy, largely being raised by a single mom. There was no doubt that I was loved and that um, I was being raised to be able to do whatever I thought was important in life. And so I just try to take every possible opportunity to not only better the world for myself and my family, but for others. And that's really rooted in a Christian parochial education that dates back to kindergarten. Shout out to Faith Christian in LA.
Come
No
on
longer
now. Come
exists
on.
now. But really, it's for me, it's about leveraging all of the great education that I've received over the years to figure out how best to transform the plight of the African American community so that the statistics are different, so that the narrative is different, and so that we as a country benefit from all of the opportunities yet to come to fruition that really only come as a result of offering opportunities to advance equity.
Yes, ma'am. I love it.
Mhm.
Um, Tell me about how you've come to the mission, vision, values of Blackstone. What's that bridge from where you came from in LA?
Yes. So it's interesting because 5 years ago, I did not even know that Blackstone Consulting Inc. or BCI even existed. For almost 20 years, I have, in some instances, held multiple jobs. It's funny because I married into a Jamaican family, and I don't know if you remember in Living Color, but they used to joke about Jamaicans having 10 jobs, but I married into a family that understands that if there is an opportunity to advance, it's got to be an environment where people are not just working or you're not just a worker, but you
Mhm.
have got to um, think in a way that's entrepreneurial because the statistics for workers, especially for Black workers, um, are not necessarily that bright. I think there was a study that was done earlier this year that said for African Americans, 70% of us that are in the middle class will not pass that middle class status down to the next generation. And so for me, and I guess this is also answering a bit of your backstory question,
Mhm.
for me, entrepreneurship has been a catalyst to try to close the gap and explore opportunities to build bigger and better than oneself. And so for me, that started in 2005, getting married to my husband in April, going to South Africa for business, and my entire career has been international since graduated from college. But while they're learning that South Africa had a $3 billion wine industry, however,
Wow.
less than 1% of it was owned by Black South Africans, which they represent 90% of the population. So for me, that was a disconnect. And I scratched my head as I learned this over a glass of wine at a wine festival and fell in love with the wine while I was still very much in the newlywed phase of my marriage, and the very, the very next day asked my husband, like, if this could be the way that we got out of just being workers and explored a pathway that could present generational wealth and, call it his own, state of being in love with me. He said yes. And a month later, we started the company. A month after that, I found out I was pregnant with my now freshman at Morehouse College and went on to have two additional kids. But that wine venture and subsequently our interest in a vineyard in South Africa led to a commercial relationship with a French food and facilities management firm called Sodexo,
Hmm.
which also happens to be partners with Mr. Urban Magic Johnson. And both Sodexo and Sodexo Magic became clients of our wine company. And about 10 years into that
Well, hold up, hold up,
relationship,
hold up. They didn't just happen to become clients. You did something to make that happen.
well, and I can't even take the credit for it because South Africa produces beautiful wine. And that wine, I'm fortunate enough to have leveraged as a medium through which to do a number of things. Number one, to tell a different story about Africa and her diaspora that was not
Come on.
necessarily being marketed out in the universe. It also helped as our family was able to benefit from the profit of this wine venture. We decided to grow our family. So, I have that 18-year-old freshman, but I also have a 16-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. But then it also afforded other opportunities to think about how to have the largest impact possible. And Sodexo Magic, because it serves as a food service operation and purchases, and this was while I was there, somewhere in excess of $100 million worth of products and services
Mm-hmm.
from various vendors. The experience with the wine enabled me to ladder up doing the same thing, specifically diversifying supply chains so that there was more participation and you could have a larger impact on community. But also, it allowed for me to think about and to create relationships that span beyond just my business and allowed other diverse businesses to play a part. And so going back to your original question about like how does Blackstone fit into all of this? Blackstone was a subcontractor for Sodexo Magic while I was president. And
Hmm.
Blackstone's founder, Joe Blackstone, who likes to share this story about it not being an original name, but being a company that was all about focusing on customer centricity. Who cares about the name as long as we are committed to delivering the core quality of life services that allow the business to thrive, which are food service, janitorial services, and security services. Um, Seeing him in action and experiencing the great work of Blackstone as a sub was just too great an opportunity. And the growth that I learned about and experienced was
Mm-hmm.
just too incredible for me to not decide to jump and join this phenomenal organization that was 33 years in the making.
It's awesome. But all of the experiences you had up to that point prepared you to become a top executive at that organization. One of the things that resounded with me, of the many things that you said,
Hmm.
has to do with that supply chain.
Hmm.
I think you were fascinated by the ability to look at a diverse set of suppliers in that supply chain. Can you elaborate? Obviously, the African continent had to do with that,
Yep.
but I'd just like to hear your joy about that.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't realize that you're put in places or spaces to make impact. And in the case of my career, to your point, the one common theme of not just working on Black business, which I have been fortunate enough to do for the past 20 years, but even when I think about that first big job out of college, working
Hmm.
as an account executive for United Airlines, where My responsibility for my territory at the time, which was the state of Nevada and northern Arizona, was to figure out ways to drive additional revenue. And even then, I was very, very passionate about the underdog
Mm-hmm.
cities.
Mm-hmm.
People in my territory very much know Vegas is the hot spot. There's tons of flights that come in and out of that airport a day. But it was Reno that I knew had a strong manufacturing base, but not enough uh, frequency of flights to get to Asia the way in which it needed to. And so in that moment, I partnered with the unions and with our executives at headquarters in Chicago to advance diversifying of the airline routes so that more participation could take place in Reno.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I had no idea that this would be what I naturally felt compelled to do, but it has been. And that has been the theme, whether it's making sure to take South African wine and acquire distribution into not only the United States, but Japan,
Mm-hmm.
West Africa, Brazil. It's the idea of matching the right value proposition with the right customer in a way that brings about joy.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is what's important. Now, naturally, as a Black woman who has been afforded lots of privilege growing up in Southern California, especially when I think about the fact that my grandmother, at the age of 17, got on the Union Southern Pacific Railroad from Louisiana to Los Angeles to pave a new path for her family. I realize how fortunate that I am to have benefited from that risk that she took. And so I almost feel like this is my reason for being.
I love it. I love it. Serena Williams's father took that same journey,
Mm-hmm.
and look what happened.
Absolutely.
So,
And they both, my grandmother and grandfather, their first home purchase was in Compton. So the Williams and at the time the Goches and the Hayes, they have Compton
come on now.
in common.
It's
Yes.
beautiful. It's
Hmm.
beautiful. So, when you look at Blackstone now, as you are the chief growth officer,
Hmm.
there's an infrastructure and there's the interaction with suppliers.
Yep.
Um, Share with me how Blackstone goes about, as specifically as you can, because you're not the HR person, but
Yeah.
how do they go about attracting, training, and developing their employees?
Sure. So Blackstone is a very unique business, and it happens to be one of just under 40 companies in the United States that are Black owned that have revenue in excess of $100 million. So let's sit with that for a minute because Blackstone is a very large business with revenue in excess of $900 million. And it has been Black owned since its inception in 1991. And I can tell you that the way in which we attract talent is very much with a focus on the basics. Our mission every
Hmm.
day is that we care and we impact our customers, our employees, and our community. So if we were to just drill down then on the employees component, the first element of that is recognizing that we would not exist if it were not for that passionate frontline employee who's doing the work that oftentimes many people shy away from. Our janitors, our cashiers, our cooks, our security guards. During the pandemic, there was no shelter in place. They were doing the real work. And our ability to grow despite the pandemic, we grew significantly during the pandemic is largely because we attract talent that can relate to us and sees literally in the C suite, in our leadership team, people that look like them, people that care for them in our mission statement. And so When I think about the interactions that we have with our over 9,000 employees, the fundamental special sauce to it all is that we treat people the way that we want to be treated, and we
Mhm.
understand the challenges that they face every day and why it's important for above and beyond even the demands of our customer. The most critical thing that we can do is pay a livable wage,
Right.
make sure that we have benefits that speak to the needs of our employees, and make sure that we resource their development, whether that's through training, whether that's through certification, resource their development so that they are prepared to become our next managers, become our next vice presidents, hopefully become the next chief growth officer. It's as simple as that. And I'm incredibly proud to share that this year, in our very first attempt since the company's founding, Blackstone was certified as one of America's great places to work, which is incredibly difficult as a service provider to achieve. And so I know we must be doing something right.
I love it. What you just shared with me is that succession planning
Hmm.
is based upon the attraction planning, training
Absolutely.
and developing your employees. It doesn't get better than that.
It doesn't. Although, actually,
Come on, bring something
I'm going to
better.
say that we are in an interesting moment in time in that we are, depending on where you are on the pendulum, we're swinging from being hyperly aware of the information that surrounds us and the notion of transforming from being an industrial driven country and world to being an information driven company and world. And now we're at this place with machine learning and the combination of entrepreneurial intelligence with artificial intelligence to now ignite the insight age. It's less about the data. It's like you have the data and you know what people want. Now, what are you going to do that's action oriented around growing and expanding the value proposition for your employee, for your customer, for your community? So, just one example that we're very, very excited about is leveraging HR technology and Gen AI to help employees figure out why their payroll may look different than what they thought that they earned, and leveraging chatbots to uncover the problems that need to be solved to make it easier for that HR manager to reconcile whatever the
Hmm.
challenge is, or to hire with more speed and with more accuracy around the behavioral profile that is most advantageous to do the job that we're looking to hire for. And so, while there's been a lot of talk around the potential of AI disrupting jobs, eliminating functions, I see it as this incredible tool that allows us to deliver more value to our employees and our customers.
I want to compliment you on that in the company because it's a functional tool to create more efficiency, efficacy, and effectiveness.
Yep.
I also want to embrace the notion that you brought up because there are a number of people who think, excuse me, that it's troublesome in terms of losing jobs. At the end of the day, no company is responsible for managing the balance that has to become part of
Hmm.
humanity
Hmm.
and the technology.
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge with AI. AI has been around since 1959 in Dartmouth.
Hmm.
As a person involved with the utility industry, I saw a lot of this and based upon background,
Yeah.
long time ago.
Yeah.
But what we didn't have
Hmm.
were like laptop computers when they were put on people's tables. They were so much more available to give us access to information quickly with the internet.
Yeah.
We've got to figure out whether or not we're looking at a future shock here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And it's going to be companies like BCI that have a relationship with its customers, both internal
Yeah.
and external, that help bring that balance. So you're ahead of the game.
We try. Not only do we try, we do. And the reality is that the world is constantly evolving, and the one thing that remains the same is change. It will always
Come
be
in.
here.
Yes, indeed.
And so it's important to not only embrace the change, but those organizations that excel despite it are entities like BCI that are laser focused on performance management. And I mean that not only at the enterprise level, but also the individual's career performance. What are their aspirations for the future? How are they going from setting goals to achieving them? And I think it's very easy to get caught up. I don't care what industry you're in, to get caught up in the tactical day to day of operations, especially when, fire drills are called by the powers that be. And so those companies that have the ability to withstand are those that are not afraid to introduce mechanisms to encourage agility. And so I think that going back to your statement about why do people come, why do people stay? Because the other unique thing about BCI is our turnover is half of what the industry's is.
What?
It precisely. And a lot of that relates to the mission of care and impact, but especially setting goals so that the organization or the individual has a clear understanding of expectations and then creating an operating rhythm that encourages review because you're not always going to meet your goal the first time or something else comes and it takes priority. You have to be nimble because it's the agile organization that will win with the customer every day.
What you just articulated sounds a lot like a gymnast or a
Mm-hmm.
martial artist
Mm-hmm.
who constantly, on a daily basis, are mindful in the moment that what they're doing then prepares them for the next minute.
Oh, yeah.
This is outstanding in today's society because not every organization creates that sense of belonging.
Oh, no. Not every organization is a great place to work.
Come on now. You want to drive by work.
Yes. You're tired before you walk through the door. And in the service industry, that's way too common. And when you look at the demographics of the service industry, that's way too many people that are diverse, that are directly impacted. And so I love the work that I do, largely because growing BCI, naturally, it's about growing revenue. But our stakeholders are not just our customers, and our intentionality around making sure that there's happiness, it's authentic. Our values are pretty simple. We are passionate about customers because without them, there is no job to go to. We also believe in win-win. There are times where we partner with our competitors that we call our frenemies because it's in the best interest of all parties. And then the third value that we have is to be authentic in all that we are and all that we do. And if we can just stick to those basics, then the other things fall into place. And there's also no idealism around the work that we do. People will be people. People are imperfect. Sometimes we will have good days, sometimes we will have bad, but as long as we can hold on to our values, which really center around pioneering innovative service solutions
Yes.
so that we can deliver to our customers with excellence. If we do that, stay focused on the mission, and remember that our values are to be authentic, to have a win win mentality, and to be passionate about the customer, there's nothing we can't do.
Clearly, there's an impact, a domino effect
Hmm.
in the way you work with your employees because they're going to go home and put food on the table,
Yep.
clothes on the backs of their kids,
Hmm.
and pursue a quality of life.
Hmm.
That's an obvious impact. Are you doing things with the community, in the community, that lift it up?
Without a doubt. Um, what's really neat about Blackstone is I've got a founder boss in Joe Blackstone who I I really look up to. And not that of course, I looked up to my former boss, Mr. Urban Magic Johnson. I've just been lucky to have some really strong leaders that I've been able to learn from.
Something tells me they've been lucky.
Likewise, it's definitely been reciprocal in nature. And as someone who grew up not having a father, it's also been a little bit serendipitous to develop relationships with people who I greatly admire and have, been and done things that I still have yet to accomplish. And so when I think about how that resonates with community, Joe, his wife Jess, or I'm sorry, his wife Jamie and his daughter Jess, 5 years ago, decided that they wanted to do something to disrupt the prison pipeline.
Hmm.
There is this crazy statistic that if a child is not reading at grade level by the time they are in either the third or fourth grade, their chances of entering the correctional system increase by 500%, and their health outcomes are not as great as those who do. And so BCI actively, we're in the middle of a book drive right now to support the 700 students that the J3 Foundation, Joe, Jamie, and Jess is the J3 alliteration, that the J3 Foundation focuses on to get these children up to reading level in Compton, Watts, and other vulnerable areas in South LA. We also, because of
Congratulations on that.
thank you.
That's
I
fantastic.
yeah, again, I can't take the credit in the way that they can for founding it, but I tell you every chance I get, I am aiming to amplify the impact of what it is that they do. And because we do so much from a food service perspective, for example, BCI is the largest food service provider to the US military. Initiating food drives are important to us
Hmm.
because there are still, especially in areas that are impacted by or that are primarily Black and brown, there's still way too many food deserts. People are not eating healthy enough. And so that too is incredibly important as a catalyst for serving community, literally serving community. And then personally, I spend a lot of time focused on making the world a better place. In my downtime, I serve as a board director for the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco for the LA branch, which is deeply personal as an LA native. Um, and to see the evolution of our city and the challenges that we face, especially around the unhoused.
Mhm.
And so every month, alongside the other directors and the operation that is the Fed, not only are we thinking about the ways in which monetary policy can, bring balance to the economy, right? And for all intents and purposes. I'm so proud of the economists there who have, in essence, helped us to softly land post pandemic, which is not to say that interest rates and the inflation couldn't be a little bit lower, but we're getting there. But we spend a lot of time thinking about how to make sure that the entire community benefits when the market is good, and that the most vulnerable are not as terribly impacted when something bad happens. And so it goes back to BCI's mission. We care, we impact not just the customer, not just the employee, but also the community in ways that we hope will withstand or bring benefit for generations.
You are creating a healthier ecosystem
That's it.
for these communities. Tell me this. How long have you been involved with the National Minority Supplier Development Council?
Wow. Since October 25th, 2005. So almost 20 years of learning, of sharing with the NMSDC. I'm laughing in my mind because I think about 2 years ago down in New Orleans having an opportunity to open up for one of the dinners. And that year, Mr. Urban Magic Johnson opened up the exchange. And so there's so much great activity that happens at NMSDC during the conferences. And even more special, I think, are those special quiet conversations off to the side with people that you meet, that make it such a great place to come year after year.
It's a special place through certification. And right now, about 150 million have been offered and announced last night from various organizations.
Wow.
So Ying McGuire's goal to really take us up is honorable.
Yes.
And so we can achieve it. I think what's important now is, given that many years here, how do you see the next steps with the National Minority Supplier Development Council?
Wow. I think having observed its evolution, where I see the biggest opportunity is in the partnerships that do exist with expanding certification abroad. I see as an untapped opportunity for many diverse populations to do more with the home base.
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated as an African American sometimes to determine what home base is, but an organization like NMSD can be a catalyst for that. Separate and apart from that, there are commercial organizations like Ancestry.com and
Right,
23andMe
right.
that can culturally be the catalyst for determining where people seek to make those business connections.
Mm-hmm.
And then the NMSDC, through its partnerships and perhaps into the next 40 years, can do so as well by partnering with other organizations abroad to bring about the supply chain diversification that's needed, not just here in the US, but across the globe. Colonialization impacted a variety of cultures and populations. Let's leverage this insight age that we're in to allow these learning language models to do the predictive analysis on where the opportunity is for NMSDC to go next.
Come on. I love it. Listen, it's a game plan that makes sense. We actually have, let me speak to something you said that's very important.
Okay.
Because of the nature of colonialization, so many people come to America in different ways, or to other countries.
Yep.
So I had the opportunity to go to the London Chamber of Commerce a few months ago as a result of being in Europe. And what I learned very quickly is how many folks from the continent and other places are in the UK.
Oh, yeah.
And the challenges they're dealing with, given they had not had a civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so, bringing it back home, we actually have a visitor from a parallel organization from London.
Mm,
Reshma is coming here. We'll be interviewing her. And it's the
beautiful.
Minority Supply Development UK,
Beautiful.
which is like a sister organization to us and kind of mimicked what they did from us. But it just underscores and highlights your point
Yes.
that we need to look at a global economy.
Without a doubt, and learn from best practices wherever they surface.
Yes, ma'am.
So, in the way that you described the UK having a lack of a real civil rights movement in
Mhm.
the way that we did, and I mean, in some ways, America's history is one that is rooted in a level of conflict and violence that is unique and made the civil rights movement imperative for survival. Even I think where the UK could teach us a few things is in the way in which they have been over the course of the past 30 years very intentional about distribution of wealth and uncovering opportunities for all communities or all stakeholders in the country to participate in the economy, unlike I've personally seen here yet.
Mhm.
But on the flip side, that is not necessarily dedicated to closing the racial wealth gap, but they are making strides around equity, economic equity, and around ESG initiatives that
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
much more focused on the health of the planet, unlike we are today.
No doubt. And the assault on DEI here in
Mm-hmm.
America has stalled what could have happened with the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
There are challenges in Europe that are in harmony with what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with, are you going to take my job?
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's also, are you going to take my guns?
Right.
But there, guns are, it's not an issue. But
Right.
there's a lot of conflict. Even when I was there, the immigrants suffered badly.
Mm-hmm.
There were three young ladies who were stabbed to death
Mm.
by someone who was identified as an immigrant that was born in the UK.
Mm.
But that's how misinformation travels.
Yeah.
And subsequently, a few hotels where immigrants would come to stay as they were being kind of positioned in other places in the country were burned down.
Oh.
And so that conflict you talked about,
Mhm.
cultural conflict,
Yeah.
is ignited by misinformation and blatantly disinformation.
Yes.
It's intentional.
Yes.
And so I think to your point of what's happening with BCI,
Mhm.
treating people with the kind of belonging and care that you do makes a difference in people being able to discern what's misinformation.
Without a doubt, because trust is built
Come on now.
when one recognizes that you care. It's as simple as that. We're not talking rocket science here,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
but without it, you have nothing.
I agree. Do me a favor. As we come to a close, a couple things I want to talk about. I don't think we really spoke enough, in my opinion, about your leadership responsibilities at BCI. And I think our audience wants to hear that because there's no doubt in my mind that you're a leader. You influence positive change. What are those responsibilities?
Great question. Uh, since my arrival in April of 2023, to date, BCI has grown by more than 150 million in revenue.
Wait a minute. Say that again. Say that again
BCI
loud.
has grown by more than 150 million in revenue, and my call to action is to see revenues exceed a billion within the next 4 months and to exceed 2 billion by 2027. So when we talk about purpose,
Mm-hmm.
The way that I think about enterprises is that with a large organization that's able to hire individuals, you have the ability to impact not just yourself, not just your family, but the families of others. And so my role is to make sure that BCI's brand is recognized and the work that we do, our organic growth, because a large portion of that 150 million is organic growth with existing clients. A lot of that is because there is the trust that we know what we're doing and that in a squeeze, we can be counted on. And so to be able to effectively serve that purpose and deliver on that promise, I have to make sure that our growth does not come at a cost to our employees or our community in an adverse manner.
You have spoken about people, care for them, purpose, which lifts all the boats with the tide,
Mhm.
and the planet.
Mhm.
And so I think that's pretty much 360 full circle. But I would be remiss in not closing out this session by asking you, in spite of that 360,
Mhm.
is there anything else that you like to share about BCI, your insight on what's happening in the world, wherever you want to go?
The most incredible lesson that I have learned from my boss, Joe Blackstone, is how powerful a quiet humility can play when building a business, especially a business that's dedicated to enhancing quality of life. All of the things that I've shared with you that we do, at the end of the day, they're about making it easier for people to be safe, to be in a clean environment, and to be nourished, which I can't think of anything more noble than caring for quality of life. And so when I think about the thousands of NMSDC, MBE certified businesses out there that are angling to assert their point of differentiation or to acquire new customers by leaning in on their brand promise, the only thing that I would want to encourage is the reality that sometimes life is not a sprint, but it is a marathon. And there will be moments when quiet humility is important. And then there are other times that you have to boldly stand and go where no one else has gone to have the impact that we need and that is imperative to closing these 4 centuries old gaps that exist for racial equity and gender equity. And so, my call to action to anyone listening is to stop and take notice of what catches your eye. And I mean that in like the most basic sense. So when you're walking down the street or driving and you see a billboard ad, it just shakes you to your core and gets you so excited because you want to be a part of it, great. Or if it angers you to your core and you want to see it eliminated, take note of what those things are and assess the pattern because it will be in the collection of that data, the analysis of that data, the data of the pattern
Mhm.
that will reveal your purpose, your passion,
Mhm.
or where you need to shift energy. And that's it.
In this National Minority Supply Development Council's Equity in Business podcast, you have brought joy and encouragement, and you left as you walking out the door and drop the mic, you're leaving by saying, use your God-given curiosity to be aware of yourself, other people in your environment, to assess the delta, the change of the same things, and develop a course of action for success there.
That's it.
That's what I got from this.
Yes.
I'm praying that they got it too.
Me too.
Thank you, ma'am. Give
Thank
me a hug.
you.
Give me a hug. You are wonderful. Let's do this again because I like to do a follow-up
Perfect.
on what's happening with BCI and particularly your interaction with the National Minority Supply Development Council since 2005.
Would love that.
So
and next time I won't be coming straight off the plane.
Oh, look, you can come anywhere you want because what you brought were gifts.
Thank you.
And we love it.